Hi friends, I hope you're doing well. Some of you have been asking about perspective. What is it? How do you figure it out? Do I need it on landscapes? We'll go over all that today along with thinning paint and when to varnish. Look, I can get passionate about some of this stuff, so we're going to have a talk. But before we get too far, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe, and click that notification bell. Above all, share this video with someone you think could benefit from these fundamentals. I'm Kendall Stump, and welcome to the Stump Project. Before we really get started, I wanted to let you all know about the Kickstarter that my son Claire started. He's an illustrator that's working his way through college, and he's come up with this really cute idea that he plans to grow over time. They're characters from his story made into enamel pins. I'll put the link in the description below, and I hope you go check it out and show him some support. Like I said in my intro, there's a few things I want to discuss this week. The first is going to be perspective, and the different points of perspective and how to use them in your landscape paintings. The second thing is going to be additives, putting things into your paint, and then we're going to talk about a little bit about the different types of varnish. So to start with, let's start with the colors I'm going to use this week. We have some sap green, some burnt sienna. This is a little bit of liquid. That's the additive that I use. This stuff right here. It speeds up the drying time of your oil paint. So I find it to be very, very beneficial, especially if you're using some paints that tend to dry a lot slower, like titanium white, for example, which I forgot to put on my palette. So we'll do that right now. Titanium white. So liquid, cerulean blue. We're not going to use a whole lot of this, I don't believe. Just a little bit. And of course, titanium white. Okay, so the first thing, and I often get asked this, I'll move this brush here out of the way. I have a couple of different additives here on my palette. Like I said, I got the liquid, and I've got a 50-50 mixture of linseed oil and odorless mineral spirits. Let's talk about perspective. First is first. First, you decide. We've talked about you divide your canvas up into thirds. Right. This just gives you proper balance, gives you an idea of layout and composition. So we're going to decide on the horizon line is here. Now, perspective is a funky thing because there's different types. So there is a 3-point perspective. So you would have a vanishing point here, a vanishing point here, and a vanishing point here. And then what this looks like is like all roads lead to these things. So there would be lines that come out this way, lines that come out this way, and even lines that would come out this way. And when you make your object, say in this case a well, even oops. Even like this. And when you make your object, oops, so like this one would go straight up and down, goes straight to that vanishing point. This one would come at an angle like this. This one would come at an angle like this. Because they're verticals, the verticals will point to this one. This side between this vertical and this vertical will point to this one. Make it a little darker for you. This vertical will point to this one. I'm sorry, horizontal. This horizontal will point to this one. This horizontal here will point to this one. This horizontal here will point to that one. So you can see you have this structure here based on 3-point perspective. And you can see how that really forces. So if you imagine this being a building of some sort, right? So the doors would have its same kind of follow the vanishing points. we have the same kind of structure. If you have windows in your building, they're going to all point to that vanishing point on this side and the same on the other side. So you can see how that gives form and reason to that shape. So there's that. The other, we'll put our vanishing or horizon line back in here. We have a 2-point perspective, and that's going to assume that vertical is always vertical. It's always straight up no matter where it is. It's not going to point to anything specific. So we'll say we have a vanishing point here and we have a vanishing point here. Again, we've got all of these lines, imaginary lines that will come out. Like that. And vertical is always vertical. It's not pointing to anything specific. But the horizontal lines will point to the vanishing points. That one points to this one points to this one. So you can see how that helps you develop the form of that object. And then lighting can play on top of that. That's 2-point perspective. All right, 1-point perspective. We're just working backwards here, and that's fine. All right, horizon line, right? 1-point perspective, you choose your point. That point is always going to be in the horizon line. And maybe I neglected to say that. On the 2 and the 3 points, your 2 of the points are going to be on the horizon line. It's always on the horizon line. The 3rd point is up. So 1 point is going to be on the horizon line. 1-point perspective is going to be on the horizon line. So just like everything else, it's got these lines, imaginary lines that are going to be protruding from it. In this case, vertical is always vertical. Horizontal is always horizontal. It's not pointing towards anything. For example, we'll put this box in here. This line is going to be horizontal. This line is going to be horizontal. This line is going to be horizontal. Vertical, vertical, horizontal. Sorry about that. And then the side would point to, I'm going to move, we'll pretend that that's the vanishing point right there. And then the parts that are going away from you are going to point towards that vanishing point. It doesn't have to go all the way back to the horizon, but that one is vertical as well. So you can see, based on where this is positioned, like if you had one over here, this, vertical, horizontal, and then you wanted to bring this back to, point it back that way. This will point to here, bring it back that way, and then to put the back edge on is vertical. Now, you don't see the tops of these, and this is very, very important, and this is what leads into something to take note of on all points of perspective. If your top of your object is above your horizon line, you don't see it. Anything above the horizon line, you're looking up at. Anything below the horizon line, you're looking down at. So, in other words, if this had if this had additional geometry that came out like this, like say this is a porch of some sort, right, on a house, or maybe it's a rock with an outcropping. You're looking at the top of it right now. But if that same thing had an outcropping on this side of it, and this line would come and point to this, you're looking at the underside of this outcropping. You're not seeing the top of it, you're looking at the underside of it. Even if it comes out here and it's like it's wrapping around the side of your object or your whatever it is. Maybe it's rocks. You know, like it comes out like this. Horizontal is always horizontal. You're looking underneath it. You're looking up at it. Do you see? Does that make sense? So anything that's above the horizon line, you're looking up at. Anything that's below the horizon line, you're looking down at. That takes great importance when you're putting together a landscape, because you have to take that into consideration when you're putting in your trees and foliage and mountains and rocks. What can the viewer see? So there's an artist that I watch frequently on YouTube. And I respect this gentleman. I really appreciate his work. He's been a huge influence in mine. Sometimes things are said that they don't make sense to me. Maybe they're taken out of context. And I'm not necessarily blaming him. What I've found is that a lot of times artists take for granted what they know or what you know as a viewer and may omit things, maybe not on purpose. Maybe they do it so often it's just second nature, so you just forget the important details. He was asked if he can explain perspective, and his answer was, well, what kind of perspective are you trying to do, landscapes or what? And that did not resonate with me, because perspective is perspective and the rules apply no matter what. It doesn't matter if you're doing landscape or what you're doing. Does not matter. Perspective is perspective. Okay, so what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not sure. We're going to be working on perspective. There's also other points of I don't want to say points of perspective. That's just the wrong terminology. There are other uses of perspective. You can use depth in your perspective, and what I mean by that is you can. As things go farther away from you, that's obviously a perspective. You can use the atmospheric perspective. And before you ask me too much what world I'm doing, this is a toneless painting. Tonal paintings are mainly based off of value. So I'm just kind of blocking in some ideas of what I might like this toneless painting to be like, and also, as we get closer to the horizon, as a general rule, this isn't an all-encompassing rule, things tend to get lighter, so we're just going to throw in some white as we get down here too, just to kind of lighten this up. And we'll dive into more of that in a little bit. The other thing that I want to talk about is putting things, additives specifically, into your paints. The same gentleman said that he used the analogy of using odorless mineral spirits and linseed oil. He used the analogy of putting mineral spirits on a linoleum floor, because linoleum or lino is primarily made from linseed oil. And he said you wouldn't put that on your floor because it would ruin the floor. I'm like, well, yeah, but it's a different chemical makeup. And truth be told, absolutely any additive that you add to your paint will compromise the molecular structure of the oil paint. I don't care if it is mineral spirits or liquid or a cobalt dryer or anything. You add anything outside of oil, linseed oil, and traditionally linseed oil is your binder in oil paints. So if you add anything outside of that, you're compromising your oil, the molecular structure of your oil paint. Now, I have never seen anybody's oil paint flake off because they decided they were going to use odorless mineral spirits. I don't think any of Bob Ross's oil paintings have flaked away or slid off their canvas because he decided to use odorless mineral spirits. Not to say that they won't ever, but they haven't yet. I'm just taking out some of these brush strokes and softening this background. Maybe getting a better idea of what we're going to do with it. I have some ideas, but we'll see. We'll see where it goes. The bottom line is you can use additives in your painting. You can use it. Don't, just because someone doesn't want to use it, it doesn't mean that you can't, and that's perfectly fine. If you want to, it's no big deal. It's not going to hurt anything. There are other rules, like there's a fat over lean rule, for example. And when you use fat over lean rule, it's usually when you work in layers. A lot of people, I won't say a lot of people, that's wrong. Some people work a la prima or wet on wet, which is a lot of what this is. And it's not so important because you're putting all of your layers down at one time. Where the fat over lean rule comes into play is when you're putting layer after layer after layer after it dries, after it dries, after it dries. And you want to make sure that the bottommost layer is dry to the point when you put on the next layer, it's not going to separate, it's not going to break or crack the oil that the new layer that's coming down on top of it. Because as it dries, it may shrink or expand or take on its final form while the layer above it is still not completely cured. So it can lose its integrity and crack. Fat over lean. So the more oil you put into it, the more flexible it's going to be to adjust for that cracking. I need to put more white. So there's that. I wanted to make sure that you guys understood about additives and how additives go into your paint and your use of them. It's okay to use them in whatever ratio works best for you. You don't want to use additives? Don't. There's nothing saying that you have to. You may find, and as you put things together, that you want a runnier mixture, or maybe you want, I don't know, various things. Maybe you want it to dry faster, or maybe you don't have the patience and you need it to dry faster, or maybe be a thicker paint. Maybe you want to add cold wax to it. And I wanted to just let you know it's okay to add additives to your paint. It's not going to hurt anything. Lastly is going to be varnish, and then we'll concentrate more on this painting. The same artist, the question was asked, how long do you wait to varnish your painting after it's dry? And he didn't come right out and give a proper answer that I would have liked. But the answer to that general rule is a year, 6 months to a year. Now, if you're doing a show, an art show, and you need this painting, but your painting is touch dry, you can put varnish on it. Now, it's a specific type of varnish. It's a spot varnish. Gamvar, I believe, is the one that I use. And what this varnish is, it's a synthetic varnish that allows a painting to continue to breathe, to cure. Oil paint cures through oxygen, not through evaporation. So it doesn't matter if you're sitting there blowing on it, it's not going to dry any faster. It dries through oxygen getting to it and creating that chemical reaction that makes it cure. Spot varnishes will allow your oil painting to continue to breathe, thus allowing it to cure while being protected. Regular varnishes, you put a regular varnish on an uncured oil painting, chances are it probably is not ever going to finish curing. It will always be in that semi-cured state because you're sealing it off. You're sealing it off from all the oxygen. So if you ever go to remove that varnish to clean it or what have you, you have a very good chance of disturbing the paint that's underneath. So just something to keep in mind. And I wanted to set those things a little straight. It was bothering me on the definitions that he was giving, and I wanted to make sure, words are everything, especially to those who may not know. Context is everything. So I just wanted to let you guys know a little bit more about that. Now, again, I respect this individual, and if he's watching, thank you for all that you've taught. I've gotten a lot out of it, and I hope that you maybe reach out and we can collaborate sometime. That would be completely awesome. Okay, now let's get back to this painting here. I think I've touched on everything that I wanted to touch on for now anyway. So let's, so I put on some of this stuff here, starting with dark to light, and I probably will darken this up. Again, this is a toneless painting. It doesn't matter what colors you use where. It truly doesn't. What does matter is the value that you use. That's the important part, the value that you use. And value, if you're unfamiliar with the term, value is the scale from of light to dark, or black to white. Okay, the lighter it is, the higher the value. The lower it is, the darker the value. So the further things are away from you, the more they kind of disappear into the horizon, the higher the value they should be. Well, I take that back. That's wrong. The further things are away from you, the more they take on the color of the environment. So if it's nighttime, they're going to take on more of a darker hue. In this case, it's whatever time of day you want it to be. We're putting the clouds up here. Right now there's loads of brush strokes in this, and we'll come in to take care of that. And as you get closer to the viewer, the more contrasting things are going to be. So the more light and dark will play with each other. So maybe we put in and you want to break horizon lines, or you want to break, you don't want to create tangents. So in other words, I wouldn't want to just bring this tree or this bush up to this horizon line right here, because it could get lost. I want it to stand out. So the things that are closer to you are going to appear bigger and more contrasting. So I want to make sure that those things stand out, that you can read them easily. Read is another term. It's often used in design. It just means your ability to understand what it is. I love these brushes. These are just old hardware store brushes. They just give great texture. We'll just bring that right up here, right into that light sky. Okay, that looks good. Have some water coming through there. Now let's do some stuff. Maybe this brush might be too big. Maybe this brush might be too big. This is a soft bristle brush. It's a 2-inch brush from the Bob Ross collection. I really like this brush. I haven't found another brush to blend quite as well as these do. If I want that to be water, I'm just going to pull that down. I'm just putting the brush up against the canvas like this and just pulling straight down. And then if I want this to come over this way. Now, part of the reason why this works the way that it's working right now, before we started, I put a thin coat of liquid on my canvas. It's going to make it nice and thick. Nice and slick. If you did this on a dry canvas, you'd have a much more difficult problem doing this. Some people will use other like magic white, for example. They may use that. Then you just go side to side. And give that a nice blur. See how that softened that right up? Gave you a nice shoreline. Maybe this in the background, you just go side to side a little bit. And any of that we wanted to keep that got taken away, we can put it back in, and it will go right over top of that blur area, and it'll look pretty cool. So let's do that real quick. So yeah, so working wet on wet like this with the liquid that I put on there, you pull it down, you sweep it side to side, and it blurs out what you've got. So bring extra paint in if you would be anticipating using anything, doing anything like this. That way you've got some stuff to work with. There. And then over here in my palette, you see I'm loading one side of my brush with sap green and the other side with the burnt sienna. And it just helps the paint to kind of, you see how variance. I get greens over here, I got reds over here. And just doing it like this, it just helps keep that variant going. It's just really cool. It just adds to the spontaneousness of what it is that you're trying to build. So we may need to add some more green just to darken this up a little bit. Down here I just want to get some darkness. I may add some more. I'm going to add some more. Also, I'm going to add. I think I'm going to add a little bit of Prussian blue. Just a little. Prussian blue is pretty strong. I don't want to overdo it with that. So I'm just going to take just a small bit of that, mix it in with the green, and then you can see it darkens that up while maintaining those other hues. And we'll put some more detail into this as we come along. Show you how to do that. It's really cool, interesting. Use the brush to create these interesting textures. I'm just pushing my brush up against the canvas like this and just maybe scrubbing in some cases like that. You can also use, it's more of a flick like this, using the side bristles to kind of just make all these grassy textures blend a little bit. Maybe some of the darker spots above need to be shown a little bit. something like that. That's a little bit of something for later. I want to put some additional highlights in the background. But first, some of the sky, I guess, shall we? We'll just take out some of these brush strokes. You can blend them however you like. There's something fun and organic, and just keep it very cloud-like. You get too much paint on your brush, you just wipe it off. I'm just kind of really lightly just blending this on and making this into a nice background that I can add some additional detail to. I'm going to take I take my palette knife here, just a regular palette knife. I'm going to pick up some of my blue and some of my green so I get some nice dark, I think more blue than green. Just loading up my palette knife here, and I'm going to assume this is my light. This is my bright spot right here. So I'm going to think of this cloud as a shape, and as it gets away from that bright spot, it's going to get darker. So we'll just and again, and just like we were talking about perspective earlier, anything above the horizon line, we're going to be looking up at. So you'll be seeing the bottom of the clouds. So maybe the bottom of these clouds aren't as dark as what you might be seeing up top here, because you're going to have bounced light up from the earth. Some dark there in the corners. And then really lightly, I'll take my 2-inch brush and I'm just going to softly fluff some of this stuff. Now you got to keep an eye on the paint on your brush. You don't want to create brush strokes that you trying to get rid of. But it's okay if you get some strands here and there that kind of flow out and kind of get wispy. That's fine. That's cool. This adds to the character. And then, like I said, we'll make this over here a bright spot. So as we're seeing the bottoms of the clouds around this bright spot area, I'm going to let the white, I'm just taking straight titanium white. So we're going to let this just mix with some of the color of the burnt sienna on the canvas. Now, if you don't want to use a palette knife, you can use a fan brush. Fan brush works great, especially if you're trying to get like wispy cloud-like textures. You just load it up in your fan brush and just kind of dance it across your scene here, across your sky. Just kind of let those things go where they go. Let shapes happen. You don't want to just cover up everything in just one big flat thing and let it kind of just go right off your canvas. Let it continue up here too. Like I said, you're looking at the bottom of the clouds. You don't have to pick up any fresh paint, but just lighten it. Think about where the light's going to hit. Wipe off your brush, and we're going to lightly just fluff these little wispy clouds right here that we put in. It's really light, really light. And there's some dark spots, and that's fine. I mean, it kind of, I just blended them in a little bit with that white. I mean, let the dark be there. That's fine. I mean, there's clouds, and there's clouds way back there. And the closer you get to the horizon, you're going to notice too that your brush strokes should flatten out. And the reason for that is because the units of measure as you get further away will appear to be shorter and shorter. Okay, now we'll come back down to the land. I want to add some additional highlights to here. So I'm taking a paper towel and I fold it up. There's a couple ways to do this. I'll show you both ways. This way here isn't necessarily my favorite, but you go in a nice tight edge and you can just start wiping some paint away. And I don't like that. I don't feel like I have as much control. It's good in certain circumstances. Like it's good if you're working on maybe a bigger thing that's closer to you, where you want more randomness. But what I prefer to do, I like to use a flat brush, and I dip it in odorless mineral spirits and I wipe it off. I make sure that it's fairly dry. And then I can go in and just wipe away with control specific areas. If you feel you're not getting as much paint up off of your canvas, dip it again, wipe it off, and it should help. You're not trying to remove everything from your canvas. Ideally, it'll stain. Some of the stain will remain. Twist your brush. Get the different get textures out of it. It's really what you want. And it's okay if you remove something, like I started removing some of this bush right here. That's fine. We can always put it back. It's not that big of a deal. Okay, let's put some of this stuff back. Put that there. Cover up some of that there. Good. Now, something else I want to show you, some details in the foreground here. You can get some implied weed textures by taking a paper towel and just rolling it into a really nice tight taper. And then we're going to use it as a whip and just aggressively hit the canvas. Now it works best if you have dark paint on a light canvas, and it gives you a really nice grassy texture of things that may be in the foreground off of off a canvas, out of camera's line of sight, where the viewer can't see where its origin is. You can just get some random movements. Something else that we can do is you take a paper towel, kind of crumple it up here. Again, keeping in mind your light source. If the light is here, it's going to be emanating in directions from that, right? So we can take and we can dab and pick up some paint like that. Find a clean spot on your paper towel, and you create all of these little leaves and highlights from doing that. And while you have wet paint on here, you can go into other light areas and kind of transplant some of that paint to kind of give more indication of more implied detail. You want darker spots to stay dark and lighter spots to stay light. You don't want to evenly light the entire thing. That was a common problem that I had with a lot of Bob Ross's paintings. They just felt very evenly lit. I turn my towel as I do this too, just so that I don't get like a repetitive texture. It's the last thing that you want. Control the tightness of your towel. For like if you need a really small area to come in and get some highlights on something, like around an edge. And then as things get closer to the edge of the painting, I like to keep them a little bit darker. The shoreline is still bothering me just a little bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my palette knife. I want to pull some of this stuff out. Nice and flat like this. And I just want to pick some up on the edge of my knife, keeping this top edge parallel with the horizon. So just parallel right there. You want the water to feel flat. And then with the edge of the knife, just make a line. You can always mix it with a little bit of your other palette color if you need to, if you feel that it's too dark. Or I'm sorry, if you feel that it's too bright. Just mix it a little bit. The closer we get to the bottom, the more contrasting I want things to be. Let's pull some of this down a little bit more. We'll soften this water. Just like that. That's going to help with the like that. want to blend that white down a little bit more. There. And you can see how the water just kind of goes behind this hill. So we're applying layer upon layer of environment. So I hope you guys get a really good understanding, or at least maybe even a better understanding of perspective using additives and varnishing your painting at the very end. And then you can just add whatever bits of randomness you want, just because it's nature, and it's there, it exists. Don't worry about making a mistake, because you can always come back in and cover it up if you have to. No problem. Just add a little bit more detail to some of this stuff through here. Some water lines. Because again, as things get closer to you, you're going to see a little bit more contrast, a little bit more detail. Quick recap. It's not that difficult to create perspective as long as you keep specific things in mind. You can mix additives into your oil paint and it's not going to ruin your painting. And you can varnish early, but you have to use specific type of varnish. By applying the right information, I think you're going to notice a big difference in your work. So go on and create something awesome. You can find inspiration anywhere. Don't be afraid to look. I'll see you next time.